So we've got Lindsay today. Lindsay, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm all right, thanks. You've just passed your part three. How are you getting on since that?
Yeah, I'm doing all right with it. I was on my pink license when I was doing the part three. So I was already teaching pupils and stuff then, and yeah, now I'm just building it up, getting on well with it really.
How did you find working on your pink license?
It was good. I found it really well because I sat in on a lot of lessons with my dad, who was the person that was training me. So I got quite a lot from doing that. And then I think when I started with my pupils, looking back, my first ones, I was terrified, like absolutely terrified. And I was reading from a script 100%. I was just reading my first lesson. How do I teach that? How do I teach the next one? Definitely very scripted. Yeah, looking back, it wasn't good, but the more I've done, it got a lot better. Yeah. And I enjoyed the pink license really. I think there's just a lot of pressure when you're on it because obviously you are like charging as well. So you feel like you've got to be giving some good lessons. It's whereas if you're not charging, it's not as bad as it really. You don't feel as guilty, but yeah.
That's an interesting thought on it. I taught for free, so I guess I didn't have that pressure of I've got to give a good lesson because someone's paying quite a bit of money for my time. I'd
Yeah.
not even thought of, I don't think anyone's mentioned that really. But I'd not thought of it. Maybe that's why I didn't have feel like I had much pressure when I started. But yeah, you're right. When you're charging for it, it's
That's what I
you've got
struggled
to
with a
deliver.
bit. Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So with your script, or you felt like you was kind of delivering from a script, what caused you to evolve from there? Was that just building your confidence, or was it finding ways that worked for you? How did your lessons evolve while you was on your PDI license?
I think what it was is obviously for me, I felt like obviously you've got to start somewhere with the people that are completely new to driving. So I wanted to feel like I was teaching them the right stuff. So my dad would sort of type up the lessons, what he was doing, and how to teach like the moving off and stopping and all the parts of the car. So yeah, I started off just reading through it, sort of acting out lessons, bit of like role play kind of stuff with my dad. And then the more I was doing the lessons myself, so I did some with my dad sat in the back to begin with. And then the ones I started doing by myself, I think it just was a bit more, it started to get a bit more natural then because you start to think, yeah, I do know what I'm doing. And I started to sort of think about what I do, not so much just reading from something. So how do I do it? And just like went from there really. And it just got a lot more natural after that when I felt like I kind of knew what I was doing a bit more. Yeah, it just got a bit easier then.
How many lessons were you doing when you was on your PDI license?
I started off with two because I still had another job at the time, which I was doing during the week. So all my teaching in the car was at the weekends. So I started off with two pupils, and the plan was that I just build them up on the weekends. So I got enough money because I was working part time. I just needed enough money to cover my bills because obviously the idea was for me to quit the job. So I did that. I think I started in February on my pink license. And then yeah, I just started building it up till I think I had about 10 pupils in the end. And then I quit because I was earning enough to cover what I was covering in my job. So yeah, that's what I did.
Because I'm finding when I'm speaking to a few people now, um, that they're taking on maybe too much with the students. So was you giving
Yeah,
yourself enough time to focus on your own training and developing yourself as well as teaching, like you say, up to about 10 students,
yeah.
building up to
And
your part three?
that is what I really wanted to do. I didn't want to have too many where I didn't have time to like learn anything because I still felt like I had a lot to learn. So I sort of wanted to keep putting the teaching into practice, but still have that time to study as well. So that's why I thought it's better not to have too many because you can get a bit carried away, can't you, and just like take them all on. But I thought, no, I need to get this part three done and feel like I've got the time to work on it really.
So we'll talk a little bit about your part three then. Well, it's fresh, and then we can maybe talk about a few things that you found useful in the build up to your part three.
Yeah.
But how did you find it? Let's talk about that for a little bit, your part three.
To be honest, I actually found it a lot better than I expected. And I think because there's such a build up on the sort of morning of the part three and probably the day before, I started to feel really ill, like I got proper flu. And I think that took my mind off it a bit because I was just thinking, do you know what? I feel like rubbish. I'm just going to get through it. And I just kept telling myself, like, this person is just, it's just another person. It's someone's son, it's someone's dad. Do you know what I mean? It's not, I wasn't thinking of them as an examiner. And that actually helps me quite a lot because I was quite relaxed at the time. I thought, it'll be what it'll be. I feel like I've done enough to feel like I know what I'm doing. So I can't do any more than that, really. And I was quite relaxed about it, surprisingly, because I am a bit of a worrier. Normally, I do stress about everything, but I was all right, actually. He was really nice. He put me and my pupil at ease, which obviously is good. And yeah, it was fine, to be honest.
So what did you do on your part three? What was the
Um,
lesson?
so the lesson was roundabouts as like a general thing, but it was more so because on the lesson that I'd done with the girl that I took previous, she was struggling with sort of seeing the gaps on the roundabouts and getting out into them and her position. So when we was going like straight ahead where she needs to be on the left, she was drifting across to the right. So those were the two things that I picked up on the previous lesson. So that's what I was working on. It did spiral into a lot of other things on the part three, which obviously we'll probably go into adapting, but yeah, it spiraled into quite a lot. There was a lot going on. But yeah, it was good.
So how did you find that adapting the lesson then? That's something that I think comes up on social media quite a bit is how you adapt, how much you need to adapt. So where did it go? How did it spiral? And then what did you do about it?
So it spiraled pretty quickly. I pulled out of the, well, she pulled out of the test centre. We turned left, and you immediately sort of get to a roundabout. So we talked about what we was going to do on said roundabouts with the issues she'd been having. And then straight away she rolled back on the roundabout because it's on a little bit of a slope. So immediately I had to address it. I didn't address it completely because I had to get her off this roundabout and get her through it. I didn't want to start sort of confusing her talking about other stuff. So I just said to her, just remember this and we'll discuss it in a minute. Carried on. And then I just, when we had the opportunity, we pulled in and I said, what did you notice on that first roundabout? What happened? She says, oh, I rolled back. So I just said to her, do you want to have a look at that? Do you feel like that's something we need to sort of work on? And she said, yeah, I'd like to practice like my whole start. So then that was the first thing that we adapted to. So luckily, because I knew the area quite well, I knew where there was a decent hill we could go to and practice that. So we did. We had some meeting situations that I had to adapt to. There was quite a few things. So it was very much chopping and like changing the lesson quite a lot. So yeah, it felt like at times it felt like it was snowballing, but I think because I did address what was happening, obviously it went well.
Did the examiner give you much feedback on the kind of rollback on the roundabout at the start and then obviously continuing until you could stop and talk about it? Was there much feedback around that from the examiner that you can remember?
He didn't really address that, to be fair. The feedback that I did get, it was really helpful actually. His feedback was brilliant, and that was a big part that I was looking forward to because from other people's stories of their part threes, it sounded like the feedback's pretty invaluable, really. The stuff what they was telling them, I just thought I'm actually looking forward to this feedback, good or bad, because it's going to help. So yeah, his feedback was really good, and it was more so based on like the meeting situation that we had. So basically, she'd misjudged going around something. So we did discuss it, and I agreed to help her. So a bit of talk through as was coming up to stuff. And what happened was, as she pulled off, she put a signal on, and we had a road that would have looked like we was turning down there. So then I addressed that and didn't help her with the next meeting situation, basically. So that was the main feedback he gave me, that some things you just need to put on the shelf and just talk about later. Get through the thing that you've talked about to begin with. He said you basically make a verbal contract with them when you've said you're going to help them with something and you've got to follow through with it. So that was the feedback I got mainly from him.
Okay, so you kind of spotted the mistake of the signal and the junction, but there was a little too much focus on that and not the next meeting situation where you'd agreed almost a bit of a talk through and a discussion of the first one and then hadn't almost handed back responsibility of that to the student, but left them to
Yeah.
do it on their own kind of thing.
Yeah, basically all happened very quickly and close together. So what I think he basically felt I could have done better was ignore the signal situation for now and just talk her through the next meeting situation. Because what happened was she dealt with that herself quite well. So I said, "Oh, well done, you did well with that." And he said, "You didn't help her with it like you said you was going to do." And that's the first thing. If you've said something, follow through with that first. That was kind of the main feedback that I got really from that.
That's interesting. So maybe just prioritizing the right now and then deal with the other things that maybe aren't as serious because
Yeah,
maybe you got lucky
absolutely.
that she did deal with it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Had she not dealt with that well, I mean, could it have been a different outcome? I'm not sure because, as I said, I had agreed something with her. I did help her with the next ones. I think it was just a case of me not wanting him to sort of think I'd missed anything. So I was trying to pick up on every little thing that was happening. Whereas in hindsight, it wasn't probably that important, and I needed to deal with the first thing that we'd agreed instead of picking up on every little thing. But it's just a fine line, isn't it? Because you think if I miss something, is he going to think I haven't seen it? So that's what it was from my point of view. But I definitely get what he was telling me with the feedback.
Were there any other points on your feedback?
Nothing like constructive other than that. His first bit of feedback was really, really positive. And he said that I'd adapted really well. He said it was a good lesson. He said if it was his daughter that he was watching, he'd have been really proud of it. So that was obviously really nice to hear. And my dad was sat in the back listening as well. So that was really nice. And yeah, he said that I could quite easily get it to an A just working on them things that he'd said really. So it was really positive.
So what things looking back maybe would you have changed? Is there anything you would have done differently or changed? Does that make sense for the part
Yeah,
three?
I don't think I would have done anything different as such. I think just thinking about the feedback that I was given, I would have not focused as much on every little thing, which I feel like I was doing because, as I said, I was trying to just not show that I was missing anything because I am very aware I do see everything, but there is some things that just you're not really needing to point out there and then focus on the bigger picture and, like you said, prioritizing. So I think that is something I would have done better. Obviously, everybody wants to get an A, don't they? But I was just happy to pass. Like that. That was just brilliant for me.
You said something a little earlier about when you started and the roll back on the hill and you knew the area quite well. What did you do in advance to plan your route? Did you have much of a route planned, or were you just familiar with the area so you could, like you say, adapt as you did? What did you do about the
So
route or the area?
I changed my mind quite a lot because to begin with, preparing for the part three, I was doing what a lot of people do and what you see on the internet and stuff, and trying to meticulously plan what area I was doing, a 40-minute route, what lesson I was doing, and I was trying to fit a pupil into that 100%. So I was going to do like one-way systems, and I had a pupil that I thought, right, she'd be perfect. She hasn't covered it yet. It'd be a good lesson for her, and I was trying to just put that lesson off till my part through and think, right, that's who I'm doing. This is what I'm doing. This will be perfectly timed. I went round and timed it, perfectly timed, like sort of 40-minute route, and then gets my part three sort of date through and everything, and she's on holiday. So then I start thinking, right, none of my others need that lesson. Like, I'm not going to have enough to show that, you know, I'm pushing them or anything because I don't need it. It would have just been an easy drive for them. So then I just started sort of rethinking it. Obviously, I'm still reading up on stuff, looking at YouTubes, and then it starts to dawn on me because I see these things of like, don't plan. Like, this needs to be what they need and all this. So then I started sort of rethinking it. And I got to the point where I thought, right, I'm not going to have a plan. I'm going to do a lesson the week before, see what they need, and go from there. So at the time, like probably the few weeks before, I didn't have any idea what I was going to do, nothing. And it was all very last minute. It was like the last week or two, not even two, it was the last week. I took this pupil out and we had a lesson a few days before the part 3, found her weaknesses, if you like, what she needed to work on. And I just went from there. So I had a drive around. I thought I need a loop of roundabouts, good loop that we can sort of do and adapt a little bit if needed. I didn't know the area massively well, but I knew it enough. I went and kept sort of driving around it so that I knew enough of it. And if I needed to adapt, I knew where there was things I could use. So I knew where there was a couple of hills and that kind of thing. So yeah, I didn't have the full route planned. I just had an area that I was going to use. And it was close to the test centre. So I knew if the clock started ticking that it wasn't going to be long for us to get back. So that's what I did with it, really.
Yeah, that's similar to what I'd done with my second, because you passed first time, didn't you? I didn't.
Yeah.
And my second one, not much of a route, but I knew the area and I'd been around the area with a few previous students, but not the one I was taking for my part 3. But I
Yeah.
think that's something that I see a lot of. I've got this route, it's 40 minutes, when in reality you probably need quite a short route, but be somewhat familiar with the area. So you, like you said, you can adapt to the students' needs. But how did you find your student on the day of your part 3? Did your student know what it was? Did their ability change given the test that it was? How was that?
She was brilliant. So what I did was I had an idea of 3 or 4 pupils that I thought would be pretty good to do the part 3 in terms of like their driving ability and their nerves. So I sent a message out to them all and just said, would any of you be willing to sort of help me out? This is what I'm doing. This is when it is. And I got 2 that come back to me and said, yeah, I'm more than happy to help you, which was really nice. And the girl that I took, she was actually one of them first pupils. So I started out with 2 and she was one of them. Really lovely girl. She's never, ever let me down. She's brilliant. We get on really well. We've got a really good sort of like rapport with each other, which is nice. And yeah, at the time, she was obviously nervous, but nothing was that different. She did probably make a couple more mistakes than she normally would on our lessons, which I think is quite normal, and it down to the pressure and obviously having the examiner sat there, which is why I think we had like the little rollback in the meeting situation, because stuff like that doesn't usually crop up with her. But to be fair, I was quite glad it did, because it gave me that chance to adapt. So that was good. I did quite a tricky route with her, because again, I didn't want it to just be something easy that she didn't need. But obviously my plan was, right, we're just going to work on these roundabouts. But like I said, a lot more curveballs was thrown into it. But yeah, she did really, really well. And the examiner had brilliant feedback for her before mine. He said to her, you're fantastic. He said, you're just not, he said, sometimes I see pupils that are just sort of focused on the wheel. They're not interested in anything else. They're just driving for the sake of trying to pass the test. He said, I can see you are enjoying it. You're like taking it all in. You want to learn. And he had a lot of really positive feedback for her as well, which was nice. And like I said, he really put her at ease when he got in the car. So I think that helped settle her nerves a little bit as well, which was good.
Oh, good. So what did you find helped you when you was training for the part 3, either on your PDI license or beforehand? What things have you found set you up to pass? Well, it's quite a difficult test first time. What
Yeah,
things would you
absolutely.
advise people do?
Definitely sitting on other lessons. I think that massively helped me with things like the dialogue side of things. Do you know, like not so much what you should be saying, but just how to address certain things that crop up. I found sitting in on lessons really helped me with that side of it. Also learning bits, like some things that my dad would tell the pupils of why they shouldn't do certain things or what was good and why it was good. That helped me a lot, because I was learning quite a bit sort of on the job doing that. And then YouTube massively helped me wouldn't 100% recommend it if you're not watching the right things, because obviously you can learn some dodgy things from it. But yeah, that was a huge part, definitely a huge part in me passing. I honestly think I wouldn't have passed without that, because there was a few turning points that got me thinking differently about the part 3 from YouTube. I did read a few books, which was helpful, but I'm not the best reader. I'm not a big reader. Like, I struggle to sort of sit and read anything, so I'm more the person that'll learn through watching. So I think that's why the YouTube helped me. But yeah, I did read a couple of books that sort of went through the part 3 like marking sheet and what it meant, what the points was based on, all that kind of thing. So I definitely read them a good couple of times. And a lot of those books that you see recommended a lot, I did read a couple of them. But yeah, majority of it I would say was YouTube, really, and sitting in on the lessons. Yeah, so YouTube wise, at first I was literally just searching for part 3 and seeing what comes up and just watching them all, really. To begin with, I watched a lot of Howard from How to Drive. I think he's excellent because he's one of the people, and I get why other trainers like charge you for these videos and the help and stuff like that, but I just think he produces so many videos to help people for nothing. He doesn't expect anything for it, does he? He just puts them out there, and I think, oh, that's really good. And he had a few where he sort of went through the marking sheet and stuff, so that was helpful. Obviously, your podcasts, I found them very early on when you first started. And I found Mick and Lee to begin with through your podcast, which was a huge help with their obviously knowledgeable instructing thing that they've got on Facebook. Really good. Bob Morton, that was a massive turning point when I found his client-centered learning video on YouTube. That really did sort of give me a light bulb moment when I watched that. Some really good stuff in there. What else did I watch? So Lou, bless her, Lou Walsh. I was watching hers, and her Facebook page as well, the PDI group. Just going off the YouTube a little bit, reading other people's like passes and fails on the part 3, what she has on there. They were a massive help as well. So yeah, they was probably the main ones that I was watching.
There's a lot there. I know How To. I've not watched much of them, How to Drive, but a few people have mentioned his channel being
Yeah, he's
useful.
everywhere on YouTube. If you search part 3, you find him quite a lot.
Hopefully, I'll be up there eventually with the right taglines and the good descriptions. We'll get there eventually. Um, but what kind of training was you doing then? Was it all with your dad? Because I know he's a driving instructor. Did you take any other training with anyone else, or was it online videos and getting out, either watching your dad or having him watch you and teaching you how to do it as well?
Yeah, so it was literally just with my dad. So when I did my part 1, that did actually take me 3 attempts, bit embarrassing, but 3 attempts to pass that. The first one, I missed it by 1 mark on the questions, which was really annoying. Second one, I passed the questions and I think I failed the hazard by like 2 points, but got there in the end. Third time lucky. Then my part 2, just again with my dad, passed that first time with 1 minus. That was really good. And then yeah, for the part 3, it was just sitting in on lessons. Obviously, I went on my pink license and was teaching some pupils myself. And yeah, yeah, that was it really. Just
Fairly
YouTube.
straightforward.
I did a lot of it myself because my dad's brilliant. He's like fantastic instructor. He's been doing it 42 years, I think. But by his admissions, he's not fully aware of this part 3, what it is now. He was obviously back when they did like the role play and stuff like that. He's very busy. He literally works like 9 in the morning till 9 at night. Bless him, he's like nearly 68. He worked really hard. So I didn't want to put a lot of pressure on him because obviously this is something that I wanted to do. He was giving me his time for free. Obviously, I'm his daughter, so he didn't want to charge me anything. So I didn't want to expect him to give it to me. I wanted to work for it, absolutely. So I thought, right, I'm going to knuckle down, get this research done myself, find out what I need to do, what they're looking for from me. And that's what I did. I was just reading, as I said, the books, the YouTubes, and just getting as much from every source possible, really, as I could. So yeah, I did that a lot of that myself, that side of it.
I failed my part three twice, past third time. So
How
we got
did you?
similar with the part three, not the part three, the part one, sorry, the theory
Yeah.
test. I failed that twice, past third time.
Oh, I'm glad
Did
it's
you
not just me
find?
then.
No, no, it was me. I was useless with it. I passed my hazard perception every time, just not the
Yeah.
questions. But did you find anything helped you prepare for your part one? I didn't do much preparation initially, but did you find anything that helped with it?
To be honest, not really. I had the apps, and I was just really doing the apps more than anything, answering the questions each category. I was just answering them all, doing all the mock tests. And that's all I did for it, to be honest. And I was just finding like some curveballs when I got to the actual test. Like a lot of them are common sense, aren't they? But then some of them, I was just like, what is this? I haven't really seen this before. And I think it was them that probably threw me, to be honest. But yeah, I didn't do a lot. I didn't do a lot of work for it, I can't lie.
Yeah, that was similar for me. I've done some of the apps. I've done a lot of theory tests in the past for different licenses. So I kind of just was like, it's another theory test, we'll be all right. And both of my fails were quite close to the pass mark, but
Yeah,
just not good enough. And then the last one, I actually done a little more reading and studying, and yeah, found it a little bit easier after that.
yeah.
But your part two, how did you get on with that?
Really good, yeah. I passed that first time, one minor. And to be honest, the minor was a bit questionable because all it was is like I'd say the new highway code thing, it's not that new, but the pedestrian thing. So there was a guy sort of walking near the edge. Was he going to cross? Wasn't he? I carried on. So he said that he'd give me a minor for that, really, but I thought I dealt with it fine. But yeah, it was that was good. And a tip that I would give for that actually, which has just come to me, I ended up with one of the sat nav routes. And I just remembered my dad telling me if you get into the wrong lane, just follow it. If you can't get across, just follow it. And I did. I was meant to be following the road ahead, and I'd got into a left only lane. And I just remembered what I said, and I put my left signal on, and I went left. Obviously, it was the wrong way. I didn't follow where the sat nav told me to go, but it was fine. He just said, "Oh, you've gone the wrong way. I'll get you back on track," and that saved me because I would have failed had I not done that. So that's a good tip for anybody that's doing the part two. If you get in the wrong lane, just follow it.
Yeah, I tell my students that around the driving test as well, go where the lane
Yeah.
takes you. I had a test today, I was sat in the back, and that exact thing happened.
Oh,
She
did
ended
it?
up in a left turn only lane. So she went left, and the examiner was like, "Oh, I didn't want to go this way, but we'll turn you around." But I did have one student, he going off on a bit of a tangent, was in a left turn only lane. But if he'd have put a signal on, he would have been able to put what we know as like a begging signal to
Yeah.
get into the lane next to him because there was quite a bit of traffic. And the examiner's feedback was that if it's safe and controlled, put your signal on, get into the lane that you want. Um, because we added, I don't know how much time he said, but he added quite a bit of time onto the test. And the
Oh dear.
examiner's feedback was you're going to take forever to get anywhere if you're not willing to change lanes. So I think
Yeah.
there's potentially a line between like you're in your lane, you're committed, and there's traffic. We need to be in that lane, but we're in this lane. Maybe let everyone know your intentions and get across. But as for your tip, yeah, go where the lane takes you. That's
Yeah, if you
definitely
can't get
something
across like
yeah.
safely. Obviously, if you've got loads of room and you can check your mirrors and you can get across, absolutely do that. But I couldn't get across. And I think a lot of people find themselves in that situation, don't they? Especially following the sat navs, where you think, oh no, I'm like left only, what am I going to do? And some of them, obviously, if they panic and just swerve across, then that's your test gone, isn't it? But yeah, my dad obviously was sat in the back. He sat in the back of my part two. And he said when I got into that wrong lane, he was like, oh no, she's blown it. And then he said, when you put that signal on and went left, I just felt like having a part in the back of the car. Obviously, he didn't, but yeah, that it went well, the part two.
Did you do much preparation for it?
Yeah, just a lot of so what happened was my dad says, right, I'll take you out and I'll just see how your driving is. I'll write some bits down if there's anything to work on. And I'm thinking, I'm a really good driver. Like, he's not going to pick up on anything. Comes back from the drive, he's got like an A4 list full of things I was doing wrong. So yeah, it was just like getting out of bad habits. Because I've been driving for like 13 years, I think now, 14 years or something. And without realizing, you pick up a lot of bad habits, don't you? So it was just ironing them out really. So I was just going out with him. He kept sort of helping me with anything that I needed to work on, and just kept improving it really. The guy that took me out for the part two, he was one of them that isn't very liked. My dad never told me that at the time. If he's watching this, I'm sorry, but yeah, he was one of them that like, oh, you don't want to get him, like he's alright, blah blah blah. But he was really nice to me actually, and by the end of it, he definitely had changed my dad's opinion. My dad said, do you know what, he was good. I'd be happy if I got in for a standards check and stuff. So I would say don't be too scared of sort of people that you've heard bad things about, because actually you might find they're fine.
I have that conversation quite a lot with my students. Not so much, well, definitely not about part two, but about their driving test.
Yeah,
Because with the students, obviously they all talk and this examiner's bad and that examiner's bad. And I tend to ask the same question. I'm like, the person that told you this, did they pass or fail their driving test? And the response tends to be, well, they failed. I'm like,
yeah,
when you hear someone who's passed and says they're a bad examiner, then maybe we'll believe them. But until
yeah,
then, it's people failing and blaming an examiner, because they
yeah,
do get a bit of heat. And I don't think it's always needed. But if you fail your driving test, you're not going to like the person that has given you the bad news,
exactly.
are you?
Exactly, yeah.
So what changes did you need to make with your driving then? What were some of the habits?
Oh, do you know what? It's hard to remember all of them because, like I said, there was quite a few, and it was a while back now. Because when I passed my part two, I was a little bit sort of lapsy daisy, if you like. I just sort of started sailing along, thinking, oh, I've got ages till this part three. I don't need to worry about it too much. And then it was very much quite a last minute panic for the part three, like, oh, my time's running out. So yeah, I did my part two quite early on, so it's hard for me to remember a lot of it, but I know there was a lot of arm crossing with my steering, which isn't as bad now, is it, as it used to be. But that was the big thing that I was doing. Probably like approaching things too quickly, that you just sort of don't pay that much attention to anymore when you've been driving for a while.
Yeah, mine was I was sitting one hand on the wheel, kind of one hand on the armrest, hovering over the gear stick,
Yeah,
not using my mirrors maybe as much as I should do.
yeah. I think mirrors was a big one for me as well.
Do you consistently drive now how you would drive for a test? Does that make sense? Have you changed your driving in the car even without a student in there? Or did
Yeah,
you building up to your part two?
yeah. To be honest, my driving is very different now to what it was prior to part two. And I think because you pick back up on all these things that you've got to be teaching someone else, you kind of just keep putting them into practice then, don't you? Just because, well, you're meant to be teaching someone else that, so why aren't you doing it? So I do it a lot more, and my partner as well, he gets really annoyed with me now because whenever I'm a passenger, I'm looking everywhere, and I'm like, slow down, you're going too fast up to that, and he really gets mad with me now. He's like, you're a nightmare since you've become an instructor. I'm like, sorry, but it just changes things, doesn't it? Like even in your driving and as a passenger.
Yeah, it was something I was told to do when I was preparing for my part two off my trainer. Was we done a morning drive where they picked up all my bad habits, told me what there was, and an afternoon drive where I try and fix it all. And then once my driving was up to standard, he was like, that's how you have to drive now. Otherwise, your bad habits will start creeping in and
Yeah,
you need to be teaching people the correct way to drive. So I've always since driven the way that I would teach someone to drive. But I'm a little different now. I'm just not allowed to drive whenever we go anywhere as a family. Mrs.
really.
drives, yeah. Half the time I get kicked in the back so that I can't comment on her driving.
Yeah.
And yeah, she drives most places now because apparently I don't get us there in time.
Because you're too slow dawdling around.
Yeah.
I can turn it on and off quite well. Like some of my bad habits do creep in sometimes when I'm by myself, but majority of the time I'm just, yeah, I'm sticking to what I was doing for that part too, and it's better actually. I do drive a lot better now.
I think it helps when you get into the kind of muscle memory of driving correctly, checking the mirrors when you should, kind of sitting in the car and hold controlling the car as you should. Because
Yeah,
if you're having to think about it when you're driving, then you're going to be having to think about it when you've got a student sat there. So you're thinking what they should be doing, and then you've got to try and watch them to do it, and then you've got to try and do it before you get to the danger. Whereas I guess if it's just that's how you now drive and you're used to it, I think that probably makes it easier for me now watching the students
yeah,
because I drive uh, probably to test standard ish, which then makes it easy to pick up the faults that the students are making um, without too much pressure
yeah,
and too much
100%.
worry.
And I think like you said, if we hadn't done the part two, you probably wouldn't pick up on half the stuff that they're missing because you do forget, don't you? Like when you've got the bad habits yourself, you won't notice all these things, what actually they need to be doing for to be test standard and to be a safer driver. You just wouldn't. So I think the part two is important for that reason as well. And if you've got the pupils that haven't driven at all before and you're driving them to and from for the first few lessons, they're going to be watching how you're driving, aren't they, as well? So you don't want to be teaching them anything dodgy.
Yeah, you do need to almost set the standard when you're picking them up and you're driving them to training areas and other
Yeah.
places. But yeah, looking back now, I think I enjoyed my part two training because you do, you rock up, yeah, I've been driving 10, 12, 15, 20, 40 years, whatever it is that people have been driving. It's like, I've never had a crash. I must be doing everything correct. And then you get someone
Yeah.
sat next to you and they're like, just taking down a load of notes. Like, nope, you need to change this, you need to change that. And then you've got to go and put it into practice. That was the thing that helped me was practicing it over just going out for drives, driving how I should for a part two. And then I passed my part two first time. It's the only one
Oh,
that I
good.
did pass first time. Yeah, it's interesting. And now we've spoke about your part three already, but how are you finding it now as an ADI?
Yeah, like really good actually. It doesn't feel that much different because I think I was obviously quite used to sort of teaching and charging on my pink license. So at first it didn't feel that different. It was a bit weird really. Um, but yeah, it's nice. It's nice to not have that pressure because I felt like I constantly had all this pressure hanging over me for the part three. So as much as obviously I was doing the lessons and putting everything into them, I probably wasn't fully focused on it because I was just worrying about the part three. I was worrying about if I didn't pass, my time's going to run out, my 2 years is up. What am I going to do then? I'm going to go around again, and there was a lot hanging on it really. So it's nice just to have that pressure off a bit now and just enjoy the lessons, enjoy teaching. I'm still learning. I'm still trying to find out information from everywhere and trying to better myself because I feel like you can always be better, can't you? And I'm definitely not fully where I want to be yet. But I think that's part of the journey and part of the fun, and you're always learning, aren't you? Really?
Definitely. There's so much I want to do and so many courses I want to get on. And for me, it's trying to find the time. This is taking up
Yeah.
quite a lot of my time now. So it's like, where am I going to fit everything in? How long did it take you? You mentioned about the time pressure in the 2 years. How long did it take you to qualify from start to finish? Can you remember roughly?
So my 2 years was about to run out in the middle of September, I think. And I took my part three on the 31st of July. So I didn't have long left. I wouldn't have got the part three in time because obviously they're coming up quite a way away now, aren't they? Like your driving tests and stuff. So I wouldn't have got it in time. I know they do like honour it, don't they, if you book it within your time still. So I probably would have got another one. But would I have passed that? Like obviously I wouldn't have known that. So there was a lot of pressure. But I think, like I said, I did the part one and my part two. And then once I passed that part one, I thought, oh, 2 years is ages. Like, I've got plenty of time now. I just carried on. I got like a bit of a promotion at work. So I was focusing on that, thinking, oh, I've still got loads of time. And then it got to like a point where I'm like, I don't know, matter of months, and I'm thinking I haven't really started anything for this part 3 yet. And then I almost didn't do it because I was sort of thinking like, have I got time now? I started worrying, is it too late? Like, am I going to get all this done in time? And I thought, I've got this far. I don't want to quit. Like, I'm going to do it. And I just got that sort of kick up the backside, really. I did have some surgery, small surgery, so that kind of took me out a little bit. So I was off my feet for a little bit of time then where I couldn't really do anything. But yeah, then after that, I just give myself a kick up the bum and thought, right, I've started this. I'm going to finish it. I want to do it. And I'm going to do what it's going to take to get there, really. And that's what I did. I just knuckled down. Every spare minute I had, I was sort of watching the YouTubes, reading the books, took my book on holiday with me. Every night I was staying up late, making sure I was revising. I did put the work in the end. I should have given myself more time, absolutely, but I got there in the end.
Yeah, it does sometimes get away from you, the time. I can't remember what my time frame was. I started kind of through COVID and
Yeah,
things got delayed. And that's the difference that I found with my route to qualify and yours was, although I still had the 2 year time pressure from the part 1 to passing and qualifying, I didn't have any time pressure of the PDI license. Because I
yeah,
guess was your PDI license coming towards the end as well then,
it was.
when you
Yeah,
took your part 3?
yeah. I can't remember which one was which, but one of them was running out at the middle of September, and the other one was running out at the end of September. So yeah, both running out very close together.
You left it to the last minute to do
I
your
left
part
it to the
3.
wire. I absolutely left it down to the wire. I think that's why the pressure was on even more because I'd left it to that point where everything was going to run out, and it was just like I'd quit my job as well. So it's like if I don't pass, if my PDI license runs out, where am I getting income from now? Like there was a lot of pressure riding on it. But I think sometimes I thrive under the pressure more than anything. If I leave things to last minute and I know it's got to be done, I will knuckle down and do it then.
I think that is the difficult thing for a lot of people coming into the industry, is that PDI license. Initially, you're earning or can be earning decent money. Then all of a sudden, 4 months has passed. You've got your part 3 looming, and it's like, I've quit my job, I've done this, I've gone
Yeah.
all in with the driving. And then you've got to get through the final test.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what advice would you give people that are starting the process?
um start from the beginning and work from as soon as you pass that part 1. Put everything into it then. Probably don't leave it to last minute. As much as I did pass first time, I made it difficult for myself. I was definitely last minute. I definitely found my feet last minute with it. Whereas I could have had a lot more knowledge earlier on had I just got on with it from the start. It would have made my life a lot easier, to be honest, had I not sort of just thought, oh, I've got ages and just not got on with it from the start. So yeah, I would say if you're going to do it from the beginning. Really commit to it. Start learning as soon as you do it, and just put everything into it from there, really. And probably just try and make a bit of a plan because I didn't even have a plan really. I just was winging it. I was working my other job. I was doing my driving. Didn't really know what I was doing. It was my dad that said, "You're gonna have to quit this job if you're gonna do it," because I was obviously putting half into my other job and half into the driving, and I needed that 100% into it really.
Have you found any challenges since passing?
Setting up the business side of it, I was not prepared for that one bit. I didn't even think about that, to be honest. It was all just tunnel vision part 3 pass, and then it was that sort of like weird feeling of what now? Like I've passed, all I've thought about is passing and it's happened. So what do I do now? Like I didn't know how to set the business up. Still fully don't know how to do it, if I'm honest. So that, yeah, I would definitely tell people to research that side of it because you'll pass and then you're like, what now? What do I do now? And embarrassingly, I didn't even realize that you have to buy your green license. So I'm sat there waiting for it to drop through the post. A few days went by and I'm like, I'll just research it. Oh yeah, £300, please, like pay for this license. So that was a shock to me as well. So do your research on after passing is a good bit of advice, because otherwise you'll get there and then you're just not going to have a clue what you're doing next, which is never good.
The license thing, I knew about that. The application was a little bit, I had to do my own looking into it, asking around, because I
Yeah.
wasn't on a franchise. I wasn't sponsored by anyone. I just went and figured it out on my own after having 40 hours intensive with a school. But the business side of things, I think gets overlooked by everyone because
Yeah.
on the PDI license, you tend to have someone supporting you and giving you work. So you don't need to do an awful lot. Or on the route that I was doing, you're not charging anyone. So you've not really got a business at the minute. Then, like you say, you pass part three. And it's like, what do I do now? You've got to set your business up, sort out your accounts, figure out your own diary, which I know we've spoke about with your diary. You've got a few
Yeah.
things that you need to try and change and sort out. Have you found any tips or ways to manage your kind of accounting and stuff like that?
Not really, if I'm honest, but I have been quite good with that side of things. So I did get like, I've got it all written down from start to finish of like me quitting my job to how many lessons I've done, how much I've made. I've got my receipts and stuff like that. So I'm finding my feet with it slowly. I just need somebody that's good with spreadsheets to put it onto a spreadsheet for me. Preferably, I'm thinking my other half's quite good with that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to give him all my written stuff and be like, please put that onto the spreadsheets. And I'm in sort of contact with an accountant at the minute, trying to sort out an appointment with them to get a bit of advice. And yeah, because I think what I've heard from other people that are self-employed accountants are just very useful to us. So I'm going to get that sorted out.
That sounds very much like how I started. I had everything handwritten. I
Yeah.
I used a bit of technology. I created my own template on Word and printed that out and handwritten it on that. And then I ended up having to put it onto a spreadsheet in the end to send to my accountant. But I think having an accountant was probably my almost comfort blanket with everything, because
Yeah.
anything I was doing with money, with the car, buying things, I was on the phone to him quite a bit when I first started. I'm like, can I put this through the books? Is this table all right? Is this good? So I think an accountant is something that is worth it for our industry, unless you're good with accounting, which
Yeah.
I am definitely not. I've got a
Um,
spreadsheet in the most basic terms possible to write some stuff on. Is there any other tips or advice you give people? I know we've said about maybe not delaying things and getting in straight away, um, but actually doing the job. Any advice for people that are kind of coming up to the stage where you was just before your part three or starting on a PDI license?
yeah, I think in terms of like part three, and like after your part three, I think I would just, if you're at the standard where you've passed your part three, you're gonna sort of have a good idea of what you're doing. So just keep putting that into practice. Try not to fall back into any of the bad habits that you might have had prior being ready to your part three. Because I'm always trying to work on them things of just sort of identifying what my pupil needs and working on that. Whereas before I probably had set lessons like, right, we need to cover this now. We haven't covered this yet. Let's cover this. And I was kind of ignoring and sweeping things under the carpet that kept happening. So I think definitely I've got a lot better at dealing with stuff like that, and that would be a big thing I'd say when you start teaching, is to keep working on them things that you would have been doing on the part three. Don't just use it for the part three and then forget about it, because obviously you're going to have the standards check that comes up and you're going to need to do it again. So keep working on that. And then I think just let it be more natural. So if you are sort of trying to keep things a bit scripted, just scrap that. Just keep it natural. Think about what you do and how you make it work and what you're doing when you're driving, and just try and explain things a bit more naturally like that. Because I think it's easier for you then, because you're not trying to remember, should I be saying that, and that kind of thing, which I was doing before, like what have I got to say. I don't think like that now. I'm just talking and thinking through how I do it, and it flows a lot better in the lesson, really.
Yeah, definitely having conversations with students and kind of working together, bouncing off each other makes a lesson a little bit easier when you've got someone that's
Yeah.
not giving much back. They're the
And they do
lessons
come
that
up
I
with
find
stuff.
challenging.
Yeah, they come up with stuff, don't they, that you wouldn't have actually thought of or that you didn't think they was thinking. So I've really found that where I'll ask them, oh, like what happened there? Why did you do that? What were you thinking about? And they'll come up with something and I'll be like, well, I've never said that's why they was doing that. So it really does answer questions for you a lot, which is something really good that I have found. I had a lesson this morning where we was looking at the roundabouts and he was coming up to them pretty quickly and sort of not missing some opportunities and stuff. So I said, right, we're going to talk through these roundabouts now. And I was talking through it and how early I was looking. So I was like, obviously telling him the mirror signal. Right now, I'm looking, assessing what am I going to do. And I told him, right, I've got my gap. And we were quite far off the roundabout. And he's like, oh, I don't start looking until I get to the roundabout. So I'm like, well, there's your problem. Like, you're just looking when you get to it. So then you've got to stop and then make your decisions, haven't you? So then he massively improved then. And I think it's just digging that sort of out of them, isn't it? Like, what are they doing and why are they doing it? And when you've got that, then everything else sort of falls into place because you know what you're doing with them then. Instead of you sort of thinking, well, I think you're doing it because of this and telling them why they're doing it, when probably that's not why.
I had similar, I think I spoke about it on a few episodes, but just a very simple example was much like what you said there, coming up to roundabouts too fast, going across the roundabouts too fast. And it took a few questions. We knew that she was going too fast, but when we got to the bottom of it, it was because she was scared of the roundabouts and just wanted to get across them as quick as possible. So observations, positioning, everything went out of the window and it was keep going, get across the roundabout, job done. But yeah, a few questions and you get to that point and it's like,
Yeah.
we can work with that now and we can fix it.
Yeah, because it's very easy for you to think, well, this is why you're doing it. So that's what we're going to fix. But like you said, it can be a lot of different reasons. Sometimes things you wouldn't have even thought of. I had another lad that he was doing really well in his driving, and then he just randomly started like driving around in third gear for quite a long time, whereas before he would have gone up to fourth. So I was questioning about it and stuff. And what happened is he was basically doing some lessons with his granddad in his own car, and granddad was telling him, no, just stay in third because you've got so and so coming up in a bit, so you might as well just keep it in third. And obviously things from the older generation, what they might have done before, like going down the gears to like 4, 3, 2, not sort of missing gears out and that kind of thing. He was basically teaching him some of the older sort of ways of doing things. And if he knew that there was like a turn coming up, well, you don't need to change gear, just keep it in second. So he was sort of unteaching him some of the things that I taught him, which I would never realised was happening until he said. So yeah, you get a lot out of them by just asking stuff and digging a bit deeper, really.
I've had very similar with not the staying in gear, but the going down through the gears when they've gone out with family members. They'll
Yeah,
all of a sudden be coming up to traffic lights and it's like 4, 3,
three,
2,
two.
1. And I'm watching it and yeah, similar. So and so family member told me that we should go down through each gear. And then you can have a conversation about it and why it might happen. One of the challenges I have, I know you've mentioned YouTube and maybe you need to be a little selective over what you watch, but my students a few weeks before their test are watching all kinds of rubbish on TikTok and YouTube and
Yeah,
whatever else. And then I'm getting messages 2 days before the driving test. Do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? And I'm like, we haven't got another lesson now. So
yeah,
no, because if you needed to do it, would have been through it. So that's a challenge trying to minimize
yeah.
what they're watching and the effect that it can have potentially
That's
on their
the thing.
driving. Yeah, is there anything else you'd like to add? It's been a really good conversation. Is there anything else that you'd like to share or add
Yeah,
from where we're at?
I think just one thing that I did forget to mention when I was talking about like my prep for the part three and what I did. I did have a Zoom call with Mick, which was really helpful. Again, that was a last minute panic. I think it was a few days before. He does like the one-to-one calls and there wasn't any left. They were booked up and I was like, just popped him a message like, are you going to have any more? My part three's on the 31st. Like, I need help. And he was brilliant. He got back to me. He got me in, I think, the next night. We had a Zoom chat. And I just needed someone to tell me I was on the right track. I just sort of wanted to tell him this is what I've done up to now. This is what my sort of, not my plan, because I didn't have a plan, but this is what I'm going to do, I think. This is where I'm at. And I just wanted someone to tell me, yeah, you're on the right track, which he did. He was brilliant. And any areas that he thought he could help me on, obviously he did. He sent me some really good things across that was a big help with like the scaling side of things. He sent me a really good scaling model, what they use. So that helped me quite a lot, because I did use that in the part three with some of the areas that I was doing. So that was definitely a big help. The other thing that I forgot to mention with the part three as well, with the feedback, my girl that I had, she did scale herself at the end. So we scaled at the start, we scaled throughout, and we scaled at the end. And he did question where she put herself, actually. So she'd given herself an 8. I think it was like scaling her confidence on the roundabouts. And he did pick her up on that at the end. He said, I wouldn't have gone for an 8. This is why. And that kind of thing. So that was quite interesting for him to pick up on that and sort of question the score. And it was definitely that constructive feedback that he'd given her. So they're not always just like positive. Not that it was a negative thing, but he did want to help her, and that was nice that he was trying to help her and help me with my feedback for her as well. So that was quite interesting.
That's good to hear, especially when they're trying to help the student as well.
Yeah.
I know with scaling, I'd be interested to look into that. I very rarely use scaling. I didn't use any scaling on my part three either. It's not something that I've been introduced to through training.
Yeah.
And for me, what I tend to use is more the how much responsibility. So where they're at, what help they want from me. I don't know whether that's classed as scaling, but scaling, I guess you was doing between a 0 and a 10 if they're giving themselves a score of 8.
Yeah. So what I was doing, I was using scaling, but I was just using it. I can't remember if I was just using it at the start and just asking like, or if it was just at the end, like, how do you think that's gone on like a score of 1 to 10? So I was scaling, but it wasn't the best sort of way I could have been using it. So Mick really helped me with that. The model that he sent me, just really to the point, it explains it, and it explains how to use it in sort of stages. So you're using it at the start, you're using it in the middle, you're using it at the end, and it made a lot more sense. And it was actually really helpful because it helped me to sort of break the lesson down a little bit there. Because I'm just sort of thinking, like you've probably heard a lot of people on the part three thinking they've got to keep the wheels moving. So you've got to be driving through the whole thing. And actually that helps me break the lesson down. And I pulled in a lot of times on that part three, just to keep checking in with her and like, right, how do you think them first 2 roundabouts went? What would you do differently? And using the scaling as well. Like at the start, I sort of scaled her on her confidence on the roundabout. So how do you feel about the roundabouts on a scale of 1 to 10? With your confidence, where would you put it? We agreed to do like 3 roundabouts to begin with, and then stop and talk about how it had gone. So we did that, and it just broke the lesson down and stopped me going off track really, and being able to sort of focus on each bit at a time. And then if something new cropped up with the roundabouts and she scaled herself and sort of explained to me why she put herself there, what could we do to get the scale higher, to a higher number, better number. And that sort of gave me the next thing to work on and the next sort of step for the next 3 roundabouts we was going to do. So that was a big help actually. So that's something I'd definitely recommend on the part 3. They do have, Mick and Lee have some really good tools and information that is helpful.
Good plug there for Mick at Knowledgeable Instructor Training.
Yeah, he's not paying me for this, by the way, but he was helpful.
They are great. So Mick from Knowledgeable was one of the first episodes I'd done, and he was one of the first people to reach out to me about doing an episode. The same with Lee Sparry, who is the ADI/PDI doctor, so slightly different company there. And he was again, one of the first few people to reach out to me and be like, yeah, I'll do an episode with you. And those guys are doing loads and helping people so much in the stage where you was a couple of weeks before a part 3 or a standards
Absolutely.
check. And potentially, if nothing else, just sanity checking people before they go and do the test.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the podcast that you did with Lee, that was a really interesting one for me as well, just his background and his story and where he was with like thinking, I'm getting all these passes, like I don't need to do anything different. And it's true. There's obviously still a lot of people that are feeling like that. And how he's turned it around and what he's doing now and how he's obviously helping other people. And that was a real big one for me actually. That was quite a turning point listening to his story and how he got where he is now and not passing the first 2 standards checks and all that kind of thing. Yeah, that was a big help to see what he did and how he turned it around. And like you said, they're doing a lot of things, aren't they? And just yeah, the people that need that sort of like, yeah, you're doing all right, you're on the right track, or the people that obviously you're still seeing quite a lot now that are not on the right track and they're doing like I was going to do at the start. This is the lesson I'm going to do. I'm going to shoehorn someone into that. I've got my timing sort of planned out. And once it clicks in your head and you realize what part 3 actually is and what you should be doing, it's not as hard as you think, is it? But it's just actually getting your head around that, I think.
I agree completely. I failed my first part 3, so I guess I can say it's not as hard as I made out it was. But the difference, and I've said numerous times on the videos, is my first one, I wanted to show the examiner how much I knew.
Yeah,
Um, and I made it a little more about me and look at all this stuff that I know. I can say everything really quick and I can tell my student everything. And that wasn't what the student needed. But
yeah,
like you've said, the feedback from the examiner was really good. As soon as he went through everything, I was like, that all makes sense. I'm gonna go away, I'm gonna work on it. And then yeah, I went back a few weeks later and made my part 3 about my student. And
yeah,
that was the difference because it was about them. It wasn't about me at that point. You've you've proved your knowledge with your part 1, you've proved your ability with your part 2. Your part 3 is about your student and what they need. So
yeah,
yeah, you're right. It's not as difficult, but I think it can be made overcomplicated as well if people don't
absolutely.
understand what they're looking for. And like you say, planning a 40-minute route leaves no room for adapting, which from the sounds of it was what done you well on your part 3 was that you could adapt the lesson, whether that was immediately or a little bit later, you could change where you're going. But if you're
Yeah,
planning out a 35-minute route, a big loop, you're going to struggle to adapt as soon as a need is shown. So that's interesting. Apart from plug-in Mick and Lee, anything else we're going to add at the end?
not that I can think of. I think that's about it, really.
Well, it's been great to talk to you. I've really enjoyed it tonight. So thank you very much for your time, Lindsey. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. It's been really good.